Sometimes while sitting there staring out the window, I imagined a place in my mind, a white room. A simple space coated in white paint. The white represented responsibility, obligation. It didn't require what responsibility and obligation required, but it had the same effect. It maintained the person in the room. It kept the person alive and well, along with everything and everyone that person cared for. But nothing the person held dear existed in the room. The person was alone. The person experienced no joy from bearing the weight of responsibility, earned no prize. I imagined a particular person in the room, a woman, also clothed in white. This woman constantly faced a dilemma. She longed for freedom. She longed to be the bird. Her open palms grazed the redded expanse of the wall. She knew that something lay beyond the white. She could burst out into the world of grass, sky, and lavender, but she knew that if she broke through the barricade, everything she protected would crumble, suffocate, and wither behind her. Her own freedom would last only moments because she too couldn't survive without the white. Earth and water would smother her, and radiant light would slice through her like a blade. I imagined her pressing with both hands, weighing freedom against existence and all that depended on her. But in the end, she lightened her stance and stepped away. She always chose to stay, to fulfill her obligation. I thought of the woman in the white room. She chose to sacrifice her freedom for the people who relied on her to survive. But how long could she possibly survive without freedom? How long could she last before choosing the alternative? How long could I? So that was the original free write that I did. That was what came out. And in that little section, you can see that there's not really a specific character or time period or anything specified. It's kind of an abstract metaphor. I did it just to get those emotions out, but afterwards, I couldn't get the idea out of my head. It was haunting me. So I had already decided that I wanted to write a book. I had always wanted to write fiction while I was going to college, but I never had the time. So when I got out of college, I graduated, I actually started writing a science fiction novel. But I was about 7 chapters into that when I had this idea, and I decided I had to pursue it. And this is what it turned into. And I'm going to read you the back cover, because I say it a lot better on the back cover than I can say it any other way of what this story is about. At the close of the Victorian era, society still expected middle-class women to be the angels of the house, even as a select few strive to become something more. In this time of change, Emmeline Evans dreamed of becoming a nurse. But when her father dies unexpectedly, Emmeline sacrifices her ambitions and rescues her family from destitution by marrying John Dorr, a reserve lawyer who can provide for the family. John moves Emmeline to the remote Missouri town of LaBella and into an unusual house where her sorrow and uneasiness edge toward madness. Furniture twists and turns before her eyes. People stare out at her from empty rooms, and the house itself conspires against her. The doctors diagnose hysteria, but the treatment merely reinforces the house's grip on her mind. Emmeline only finds solace after pursuing an opportunity to serve the poor as an unlicensed nurse. Yet in order to bring comfort to the needy, she must secretly defy her husband, whose employer viciously hunts down and prosecutes unlicensed practitioners. Although women are no longer burned at the stake in 1900, disobedience is a symptom of psychological defect, and hysterical women must be controlled. So I turned that abstract metaphor into this story about a woman who is basically told that she's insane by first deciding the time period. I started to write the novel. I had this idea that I wanted there to be a woman who, like me, had to move to an isolated town for her husband. But I really wanted her to be isolated. I didn't want her to be like me, who had texting and email and phones. I wanted her to be cut off. So I decided it should be in a historical time when there weren't those things. And in my mind, when I came up with that metaphor of the white room, the woman in the white room, I had envisioned her in a dress that had sort of an old fashion to it. And I took that image in my head and I compared it to a fashion silhouette timeline. And I found that it matched the silhouette of the turn-of-the-century woman. So I looked at the turn of the century, and it was a perfect time period. There's no phones, automobiles weren't even really used at the time, and it was a time for transition when it comes to women. Women were sort of simultaneously still expected to adhere to Victorian values, but at the same time they were starting to force their way out into the working world and do professions that women never used to do. So it was a perfect setting for my character to be expected to behave and be a housewife and be submissive to her husband, but at the same time it was a time when women wanted to do more. So after I figured out what I wanted to do, I started researching the time, and I started researching the house. As you heard from the back cover, the house and the furniture in this book play a very big role. They're pretty much characters in themselves.